Have you ever lain awake at night, replaying the same conversation in your head 100 times, as if finding the right version could finally let you rest? You stare at the ceiling in the dark, your body aching for sleep. Yet, your mind keeps dragging you deeper into its labyrinth, forcing you to rehearse, to correct, to imagine what you should have said, what you could have done, how it might have changed everything. It feels like control, as though your thoughts are protecting you from some invisible danger. But if you're honest, it isn't safety you feel. It's suffocation, overthinking. Music begins like a whisper, a quiet murmur in the back of your mind. But soon it becomes a roar, an ocean wave pulling to you under, dragging you into currents you cannot escape. Each thought loops back into itself, tighter and tighter, until the act of thinking something meant to guide you becomes the very trap that holds you hostage. You may even convince yourself this is intelligence, this endless analysis, this refusal to let go until you find certainty. Yet, the longer you search for clarity, the further it slips away, leaving you breathless, as though the air itself is being stolen from your lungs. You remember the small moments where it began. Sitting at a classroom desk, replaying the teacher's words, wondering if you were wrong to raise your hand, or walking home after a fight with a friend, retracing every word to see if the blame was yours. These loops felt harmless then, even necessary. But as you grew, they grew with you, twisting into something darker, a prison you built with your own mind. Psychologists describe this state as rumination, the compulsion to circle endlessly around your worries, rehearsing and reviewing, as if the mind could change the past or predict the future by sheer repetition. Neuroscientists tell us that overthinking activates the brain's default mode network, the part of you that drifts when you are not focused, creating a storm of memory, imagination, and fear that blurs reality into endless possibility. Your brain believes it is preparing you, but in truth, it is chaining you to shadows that no amount of thought can resolve. And still you resist letting go, because overthinking feels safer than silence. Silence means trust. Silence means surrender. Silence means stepping into the unknown without your armor of imagined scenarios. And so, you keep rehearsing, keep drowning, hoping that one more thought will finally break the spell. But deep inside, you know the truth. Overthinking is not protection. It is paralysis. It is the to monster that grows stronger every time you feed it. Another sleepless night, another anxious replay, another imagined catastrophe. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it whispering the most painful question of all. What if you never escape? Yet even in this darkness, there is a way forward. To understand where this endless storm began, you must return to the moment it first took root, not in adulthood, but long before, when you were still a child, quietly learning that the only way to feel safe was to think harder, longer, deeper. Have you ever wondered why some children seem older than their years, carrying in their eyes a kind of weary vigilance, as if they are always preparing for something to go wrong? You might not realize it then, but this is where the seed of overthinking is first planted, not in adulthood, but in the fragile soil of childhood, when the mind is still soft and searching for safety. Imagine a small child lying in bed at night. The house is silent, yet every creak of the floorboards makes the child's heart race. They stare at the doko ceiling, replaying the day in their mind. Did they say something wrong? Did they make their parents upset? Should they have kept quiet instead of speaking? What begins as innocent curiosity becomes a survival instinct. If they can anticipate what will happen, if they can decode every subtle shift in tone or glance, maybe they won't be blindsided by disappointment or anger. The child learns that the world is unpredictable, and so the only shield is endless thought. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, a state where the nervous system is wired to scan for danger, even in moments of quiet. Attachment theory explains that when a child's caregivers are inconsistent, sometimes loving, sometimes distant, sometimes critical, the child's mind works overtime to mind, predict which version of love they will receive. Thought becomes armor. Rehearsal becomes safety. Reflection becomes obsession. You don't choose this, it chooses you, molding the promising that on none way you see the world long before you know what psychology even is. The child who couldn't stop thinking grows into a child who couldn't stop apologizing, couldn't stop trying to be perfect, couldn't stop rehearsing what might happen tomorrow. And with each passing year, the habit deepens. Overthinking in its earliest form is not a flaw. It is a desperate attempt to create certainty in a life that feels uncertain. But the tragedy is that a child's mind, no matter how sharp, cannot solve the chaos of an unpredictable home. And so they carry this unsolvable puzzle into adolescence, then into adulthood, still trying to make sense of things that were never theirs to control. You begin to see how the overthinking mind is not born, it is built from the quiet moments where safety was conditional, where love had to be earned, where silence felt dangerous, built in the shadows of rooms where emotions were not explained, only endured, built in the placed imagination of a child who believed that if they could just think hard enough, they could make the world kinder. But what starts as a child's shield becomes an adult's mask. You no longer just scan your parents' moods. You scan the entire world. You carry the same reflex into relationships, work, and friendships as though everyone is a puzzle waiting to betray you. And slowly, the child who could not stop thinking becomes the adult who cannot stop wearing the mask of control. Have you noticed how easily people mistake your overthinking for intelligence? How they praise your thoroughness, your ability to anticipate every detail, never realizing that beneath the surface, you are exhausted from carrying the weight of 1,000 imagined futures. What they see as wisdom is often nothing more than a mask. You have learned to wear a mask, polished with the illusion of control, while behind it your mind is screaming. The child who once lay awake decoding every sound in the house grows into the mean adult who cannot stop scanning every silence in a conversation. At work, you rehearse emails 10 times before sending them, convinced that one misplaced word will shatter your reputation. In relationships, you question every glance, every pause, every unread message, as though each one hides the truth you're desperate to uncover. You tell yourself you are preparing, staying safe, being responsible, but in truth, you are dragging around invisible, luggage so heavy it bends your spine. This mask of control becomes both armor and prison. Outwardly, you look steady, careful, dependable, the friend who never forgets, the partner who always plans ahead, the colleague who sees every angle. But inside you are burning through endless fuel, feeding the monster of thought with every possible scenario, every phantom mistake. Overthinking does not protect you. It steals you from the present moment, trapping you in futures that never arrive and pasts you cannot change. Neuroscience calls this the illusion of certainty. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, keeps working overtime, convinced that one more calculation will eliminate risk. Yet, studies show that the more you ruminate, the more anxious you become, as if your brain is building scaffolding higher and higher around a house that was never in danger of content collapsing. The structure looks impressive from the outside, but inside, you can barely breathe. And so you keep smiling through the mask, hoping no one sees the truth. that every decision feels like walking a tightrope, that every choice feels haunted by the question of what could go wrong. You fear mistakes not because they are catastrophic, but because you have trained your mind to magnify them until they feel monstrous. Overthinking is praised as diligence, but it becomes self-sabotage, stripping you of spontaneity, of trust, of the ability to live unguarded. The mask may protect you from judgment, but it also keeps you from freedom. You can only wear it for so long before the cracks begin to show. And when they do, you realize something haunting. You have not been living at all, only rehearsing. To see how deep this cycle runs, you must step beyond appearances and look into the brain itself, into the scientific machinery that keeps you circling in endless loops, mistaking thought for safety, when in truth, it is the very chain that binds you. Why is it that your mind can feel like both your greatest ally and your cruelest captor? Why can the same brain that solves problems, creates art, and imagines beauty also keep you locked inside endless spirals of fear and regret? The answer lies not in weakness of character, but in the very wiring of your nervous system, in the circuitry that has evolved to protect you, but now traps you in loops of thought you cannot escape. Cognitive psychology calls it rumination, the tendency to circle repeatedly around the same problem, without resolution. You tell yourself you're analyzing, preparing, working toward clarity, but in truth, you're stuck in a feedback loop. Neuroscience shows us why. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain designed for planning and decision becomes hyperactive, working like a machine that can't find the off switch. It keeps generating scenarios, alternatives, what ifs, as though one more calculation might bring peace. But instead of clarity, you are left with exhaustion. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain's fear circuitry, lurks in the background, whispering that danger is everywhere. It primes your body for survival, even when there is no real threat. That is why an Tuver argument from yesterday feels as urgent as a fire in the present moment. Why an H played, uncertain text message can feel like abandonment. Why? The future becomes a landscape of catastrophes your body reacts to as though they were already real. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between imagined danger and actual danger, and so it floods you with tension, keeping you awake at night, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. The default mode network, another system of the brain, adds its own weight to the prison. It activates when your mind wanders, drawing you into memories and imagined futures, stitching together stories of who you are and what might happen. This network is essential for self-reflection. But in an overthinking mind, it becomes a hall of mirrors, every reflection distorted, every corridor looping back on itself. You walk endlessly, searching for an exit that does not exist. And so the loop strengthens. Thought fuels fear. Fear fuels thought, and the cycle continues until you are no longer responding to life itself, but to the stories your brain creates about life. The studies are clear. Overthinking does not solve problems. It magnifies them. Yet knowing this does not silence the storm because the mind insists that safety lies just one thought away. It feels haunting to realize that your suffering is not random. It is structured, mapped, and wired into the very organ you rely on to live. The brain meant to protect you becomes the cage that confines you. And while science explains the mechanism, it cannot soften the lived experience. The loneliness of feeling trapped in your own head, the fear of never being free. To grasp the full weight of this truth, you must confront what happens when thinking itself turns against you. When the loop becomes darker, sharper, and begins to consume not only your peace, but your very sense of self. Have you ever noticed how the very thoughts you believe will save you often become the protangs, very ones that destroy you? Overthinking wears the disguise of wisdom, whispering that if you just hold on a little longer, if you analyze a little deeper, you will finally uncover the answer that makes everything safe. But what it really gives you is paralysis. The promise of safety turns to suffering, and the mind that was meant to guide you becomes the very monster that devours you. It begins quietly. You tell yourself you're being careful, just taking a little extra time to decide, replaying a conversation so you don't repeat a mistake, imagining every outcome so you'll never be blindsided. But soon your carefulness becomes quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. You reach for clarity, but the clarity dissolves into fog, multiplying into more questions, more doubts, more shadows. In the end, you are not safer. You are simply trapped, swallowed by the very thoughts that promise to set you free. The toll is not abstract. You feel it in the moments you let slip away. The opportunity you didn't take because you were too busy imagining every possible failure. The relationship you strangled with. Suspicion because you couldn't stop. Replaying their words. Searching for hidden meanings. The night you stayed, awake rehearsing what you might say. Tomorrow, only to find that tomorrow slipped through your fingers before you ever lived it. Overthinking does not protect your life. It robs you of it. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis. The moment where thought no longer serves action but replaces it. You wait for certainty. Yet neuroscience shows certainty is something the brain was never built to give. The more you chase it, the more your amygdala fires, keeping your body locked in states of fear. Like a hall of mirrors, every A10. Reflection shows a new distortion. And the more you stare, the less you know what is real. There is a haunting irony in this. Overthinking makes you betray yourself. You betray the child who once dreamed freely, because now every dream is dissected until it feels impossible. You betray the adult you could be because you live in futures that never arrive. You betray the present moment because you are too busy fighting shadows in your own head to notice the life unfolding in front of you. And the worst part is that no one else can see it. To the world you appear careful, thoughtful, even wise, but inside you are screaming, desperate to be released from the endless loop. You realize then that your greatest enemy is not the world outside. It is the prison inside your own skull. And yet, the tragedy of the overthinking mind is not just personal. It is magnified by the world around you, a culture that praises the restless thinker, a society that mistakes noise for intelligence, reinforcing the very chains you long to escape. Have you noticed how society quietly praises the restless mind? How? The one who never stops thinking is seen as diligent, responsible, even admirable. From the earliest years, you are taught that the sleepless student who studies until dawn is more worthy than the one who rests. That the worker who never leaves the office is more valuable than the one who knows balance. That the person who worries about every detail must simply care more. In this way, overthinking becomes sanctified, disguised not as suffering but as virtue. You grew up inside classrooms where every test demanded not just knowledge but endless preparation, where mistakes felt catastrophic because perfection was rewarded and hesitation was punished. Later, you entered workplaces that celebrated the one who double checks, triple checks, who stays long after others have gone home, their mind still racing with possibilities. The culture of productivity feeds your overthinking, convincing you that the more mental noise you generate, the more intelligent you must be. But beneath the applause lies a quieter truth. What is being calm? Glorified is not wisdom but anxiety. Studies in social psychology reveal how societies condition individuals to equate worry with responsibility. The smart worrier becomes an archetype, someone who cannot rest because they care too much, who obsesses because they are supposedly more aware. Yet, neuroscience shows the opposite. Constant mental loops actually impair decision blocking the brain's ability to think clearly. Society mistakes the storm for brilliance, when in reality it is simply chaos. Stillness, on the other hand, is often condemned. If you pause, you risk being called lazy. If you trust yourself enough to act without rehearsing every outcome, you are seen as reckless. Our collective conditioning has turned silence into a crime and overthinking into a badge of honor. And so, without realizing it, you internalize these values, believing that your inability to switch off is not a wound, but a mark of pride. You learn to wear your mental exhaustion as though it were proof of your worth. The tragedy is that this conditioning does not just shape individuals. It shapes entire cultures. A society that worships busy minds creates people who are always connected but never present, always productive but never at peace. The cage is not only inside your head, it is built collectively, reinforced by classrooms, offices, families, and governments that praise endless striving while quietly ignoring the suffering it creates. And so you sit at your desk or lie in bed at night, wondering why the topsis harder you think, the emptier you feel. You have inherited not only your own loops, but the loops of a culture that believes the human being is valuable only when endlessly in motion. Yet when the applause fades, you are left alone with the truth. Noise is not wisdom, and busyness is not depth. And it is here, in the silence left behind, that you begin to feel the deeper cost of the emotional toll that years of overthinking and cultural conditioning carve into your body, your heart, and your soul. Have you ever felt the weight of your own thoughts pressing down on you, as if each one were a stone placed quietly in your chest until breathing itself becomes an act of labor? Overthinking does not just live in the mind. It seeps into your body, your relationships, your very sense of time. What begins as harmless reflection slowly turns into an unbearable heaviness, a cycle of loops that bleed the color out of your days. There are nights when you lie awake, staring into the dark, your body begging for rest, but your mind refusing to surrender. Sleep drifts just out of reach because the moment you close your eyes, the reel begins again. Every argument replayed, every mistake dissected, every possible future rehearsed until morning breaks, and you wake already exhausted. Insomnia becomes the quiet companion of the overthinking mind, whispering, reminders of what you cannot let go. In the daylight, the toll only deepens. Anxiety gnaws at your stomach. Depression drapes itself over your shoulders like a heavy cloak, and the simplest tasks feel monumental because you are carrying invisible luggage everywhere you go. You show up for your partner, but they sense you are not truly there. You sit across from a friend, nodding, smiling, but part of you is locked inside your head, lost in a labyrinth. They cannot enter. They reach for you, but your thoughts are a wall between you and the world. Loneliness does not always come from being alone. It often comes from being trapped within yourself, unable to connect, even when surrounded by love. Psychologists have long studied this erosion of intimacy. Studies show that ruminative minds struggle with presence. Their emotional energy consumed by the prostic state is endless loop of what if and if only. Neuroscience reveals how chronic overthinking floods the body with cortisol, the stress hormone that corrodes both mood and health, leaving you fatigued, irritable, and distant. And so, day by day, The loops carve away not only your peace of mind, but your ability to feel alive. The greatest tragedy of overthinking is time. Time lost to moments you never lived because you were too busy analyzing them. Time stolen from joy because you were calculating risks. Time robbed from relationships because you were more engaged with the shadows of your mind than the person sitting in front of you. You begin to realize that overthinking does not just hurt, it steals. It steals sleep. It steals love. It steals years. And yet, even as the cost becomes unbearable, you cling to it because the loop feels familiar, as though without it, you would be defenseless. But deep inside, you sense the truth. The weight is not protection. It is chains. And somewhere within you, a quiet voice begins to wonder if you could ever learn to set that weight down. It is here in the confrontation with your own suffering that the possibility of change begins to flicker. The thought that perhaps there is another path, a way to loosen the grip of thought and discover what life feels like when you are no longer drowning in it. Have you ever imagined what it would feel like to finally set down the heavy bag you've been carrying for years? The bag no one else can see, filled with every doubt, every replayed mistake, every imagined catastrophe. You don't realize how much weight you've been holding until you picture yourself without it, standing lighter, freer, able to breathe again. Letting go of thought does not mean silencing the mind. It means loosening to your grip on it. Learning that you are not the storm, but the sky it passes through. It begins with presence. Mindfulness is not just a trend, but a rewiring of how you relate to yourself. Imagine sitting quietly, your thoughts still racing. But instead of wrestling them, you watch them drift by like leaves on a river. Neuroscience shows that when you observe your thoughts without judgment, the amygdala quiets, cortisol drops, and the loop begins to soften. The monster you've been feeding with resistance starts to shrink when you no longer fight it. Boundaries, too, become sacred. You learn to tell your mind, not now. The same way you would not let someone walk into your home at midnight without permission, you begin to guard your mental space. When overthinking arrives with its heavy suitcase of what-ifs, you do not have to invite it in. You can acknowledge its presence and let it pass. Psychologists call this cognitive diffusion, the ability to step back and see a thought as just that, a thought, not a prophecy or command. There is also a shift in how you see uncertainty. Overthinking thrives on the illusion that if you think hard enough, you can erase all unknowns, but life will never give you perfect certainty. The paradox is that peace is not found in control, but in surrender. You begin to trust that not every silence hides rejection, not every mistake ends in ruin, not every unknown is a threat. Healing is not the absence of thought, but the courage to walk forward without needing to solve everything first. And slowly something changes. You notice it in small moments. The way you breathe a little deeper before speaking. The way you can finally enjoy a walk without analyzing the parkings. 2 steps. The way you can sit across from someone and feel their presence instead of drowning in your own mind. This is what it means to let go. Not erasing your thoughts, but no longer letting them chain you. The truth is simple yet haunting. Your thoughts are not you. They are weather. And when you learn to stop clutching at every storm, you discover a vastness beyond the clouds. A sky wide enough to hold everything without breaking. But even this realization carries a deeper question, one that lingers as you breathe into stillness. What does it mean to live beyond the tyranny of thought? To find meaning not in control, but in acceptance? And it is here, in this final reflection, that philosophy begins to guide you home. Have you ever realized that your mind, for all its brilliance, was never meant to be your master? It whispers, it shouts, it storms inside you, convincing you that without its constant noise, you would not survive. Yet beneath the surface of thought lies something vaster, something older than words, something you have felt in fleeting moments of stillness, the quiet truth that you are more than your thinking. Picture the ocean. Its waves rise and fall, some gentle, some violent, each one demanding your attention as if it alone defines the sea. But the ocean is not its waves. Beneath the turbulence lies depth, dark, endless, steady. Your mind is the same. The thoughts that crash inside you are only the surface. Beneath them is the stillness of being, the quiet presence that has carried you through every storm without needing to explain itself. The philosophers of old knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote of the inner citadel, a place within that remains untouched, no matter how the world rages. Eastern traditions speak of the self as sky with thoughts as passing clouds. Modern psychology echoes the same wisdom, showing that detachment from thought, seeing it as a tool rather than an identity, restores balance to the nervous system. Neuroscientists call it meta-awareness, but you feel it as liberation. The moment you recognize that you are the witness, not the storm. And here lies the paradox that once tormented you. When you fight the waves, you drown. When you try to silence your thoughts, they only grow louder, like shadows swelling in a hall of mirrors. But when you learn to float, when you allow the waves to rise and fall without grasping, you discover something astonishing. The ocean was never against you. It was carrying you all along. You. Think back to the sleepless nights, the arguments replayed, the opportunities lost to fear, and you realize they were not proof of your weakness, but evidence of your longing to be safe, to be certain, to be free. Overthinking was your way of reaching for control in a world that never offered guarantees. But true freedom does not come from control. It comes from trust, from loosening your grip on certainty and learning to live in the space beyond it. And so you stand now at the edge of the mind's ocean, no longer fearing the tide. You understand that thought is a servant, not a ruler, a compass that guides but was never meant to imprison. And as you breathe into this realization, something within you softens. You are not drowning anymore. You are floating. The waves continue, but they no longer frighten you. For the first time, you see them for what they are. Movements on the poppet, surface of something far deeper, far greater, something that has always been carrying you toward the horizon of your right-assed own becoming.